This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
It's been another jam-packed weekend of how much wrestling can I feasibly cram in to prepare for these podcasts. I think I'm still doing okay on time, but I have Mid-South and World Class I still need to watch today, and I definitely need to find time to record the WCW part of the Friday show at some point tonight. Busy. It's amazing because my schedule keeps changing, but as the schedule keeps changing, I'm also finding that my window to actually watch all this content over the weekend is closing up. Not even the recording time, but to actually sit down and watch everything. Which shouldn't be the case, because I've had a pretty consistent formula for that over the last how many years I've been doing this. But man, it's getting more and more challenging. Still gotta make room for the hobbies. Otherwise I'll drive myself mad. Even though I'm a workaholic by nature. Hope everyone's doing well on this Monday edition. You are currently tuned into the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. The wrestling podcast nobody knows but everyone needs. We are here on YouTube and Rumble each Monday and Friday to bring you classic wrestling coverage. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the show, and stop back every week as we go through the archives and try to look back at a time when wrestling wasn't completely looked down upon by the public sphere. It used to be that people would admonish politicians like John McCain for calling the UFC human cockfighting. Fast forward a few years, and you've got social media footage coming out where so-called pro wrestlers are legitimately grabbing each other by their private parts as a gimmick. That was where I lost all faith in humanity right there. When all that Joey Ryan content started becoming viral and people were actually defending it, that's where I completely dissociated from the internet community. I just said, we had nothing in common. Y'all can stick it. If that's what you call pro wrestling in the modern era, we can agree to disagree. Thankfully, the WWF wasn't that bad in 1996. Shows still weren't very good, but they weren't exposing the business to that level. All right, guys, help me out here. What happened last week? I already forgot. It has been a whole 7 days since I've even remotely thought about what happened last week on Raw. Which I guess would make sense, considering we only reviewed the show last week. Here's what I remember. Bret Hart cut a really long promo about like 50 different things. And Triple H conspired with Mr. Perfect to fuck Mark Mero out of the Intercontinental belt. Does that cover at least the important matter from last week? Whatever else happened in between, it's all a complete blur to me at this point. Not to undersell that Bret promo, by the way. It was actually one of my favorite things I've talked about on Raw in a while. We're moving the needle forward, though. Survivor Series 96 is coming up in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I think it's 3. And we actually had a really big angle take place on WWF Superstars. An angle between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, which was basically the catalyst that kickstarted their rivalry, even though Austin and Bret are still in the middle of their program. I'm sure most people are well aware of the phrase Pillmanizing. It's kind of a broad internet term that people have taken and run with over the years. Well, it stems from an angle they shot when Austin wrapped a chair around Pillman's leg and jumped off the middle rope to injure and cripple him. Now, why or how this specific term came to apply to future angles when somebody would use a chair to injure a body part on another wrestler, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, it's not like this particular angle wasn't already done in the business 100,000 times previously. But that is where the term Pillmanizing or Pillmanized comes from. So-and-so just Pillmanized so-and-so's leg with that chair. And if you recall last week, there was a split screen during Bret's promo where all the heels were watching from the locker room. And when Bret accepted Austin's challenge for the pay-per-view, Pillman was the only one gleefully cheering and marking out over it. And so this was Austin's way of sending a message and, I guess, getting back at Pillman for stepping out of line. Kind of unfortunate they never really got the opportunity to explore more of the Austin-Pillman heel pairing in the WWF. And they couldn't book him in tag matches because Pillman was injured throughout all of 96. So we never got a true Hollywood Blondes run with Austin and Pillman in the WWF. God knows they needed some tag teams. So after they show that in the cold open, they go to the ring for Jesse James versus Salvatore Sincere. This is where I insert my obligatory, you know there was a ratings war going on cliche. Double J versus Sal Sincere. What a curtain jerker. It's wild too because everything Jesse did in this match, he was practically replicating everything he would eventually do as the Road Dogg. Minus the suck it gestures. But nobody in the crowd gave a shit about this. It was just two underneath guys doing moves for 5 minutes. The work was mediocre at best. Eventually, Jesse just grabbed Sal and gave him the pump handle for the 3. And since we already had confirmation by this point that Jarrett had signed with WCW, killing any and all plans to ever do Jarrett versus Road Dogg on pay-per-view, this is basically what they had as a backup plan for the real Double J. He was just another guy with a bad gimmick doing matches. So following that, and normally this is something I don't even bother with, but when I saw Doc Hendricks do the Survivor Series card rundown, it reminded me as to why I completely forgot about all the traditional 5-on-5 elimination Survivor Series matches. You know, the whole purpose of why Survivor Series was created in the first place. I did not remember a single tag match from 96. And now I know why. Get a load of this lineup. Now, I'm excluding the WWF title match, Bret Austin and Taker Foley. I'm just strictly going over the Survivor Series matches. First, we have Triple H, Goldust, Jerry Lawler, and Crush versus The Stalker, who I guess now is a babyface, Mark Marrow, Mark Henry, and Rocky Maivia. Yes, The Rock, ladies and gentlemen. That was how they announced his WWF in-ring debut, via promo package in the middle of the show. The soon-to-be second biggest babyface attraction during the height of the Attitude Era. Just randomly announced here during a pre-tape on Raw. We also had this barn burner elimination tag match of the fake Razor and Diesel, Farouk and Vader versus Flash Funk, Savio Vega, Yokozuna. What? And since we're drawing random names out of hats at this point, why not? Why not have Jimmy Superfly Snuka make a cameo here for a complete throwaway Survivor Series match? I know he was part of the WWF Hall of Fame class that year, but still, of all matches to put him in, this fucking random hodgepodge of bodies. I think there's a third match they eventually have to announce too, but I'm actually going to wait to see if they bother even mentioning it. They might have just thrown that one on the card for shits and giggles. Yeah, the talent pool was really bad in 1996, everyone. In case that wasn't already apparent. Speaking of piss poor talent, there was a Crush versus Aldo Montoya match that sent me into a deep depression. Again, people, I hate to keep beating the dead horse. WCW is on the other station right now eating the WWF's asshole from the inside out. These people are combating that with Crush versus Aldo Montoya. Unbelievable. By the way, I know he's a heel, but Jim Ross summed it up perfectly on commentary. Live on air, not even being ashamed, he outright buried the whole thing by branding it a prelim match that was beneath him as a commentator. Not wrong. They now have Plant sitting at ringside with jailbird signs. Guess they figured it was their only hope of getting anybody to ever care about Crush in the WWF. Nope, they were still wrong. People did not care. He beat up the thong-masked geek for a few minutes and won with a hard punch. He also made really awkward constipation faces at the camera during certain parts. I don't know why. I don't know if Brian was attempting to look menacing and or mean. He just looked extremely uncomfortable. Like he needed to take a Pepto-Bismol or something to cure a stomach bug. So after that complete waste of time, energy, and effort, they replayed the angle with Hunter and Mr. Perfect from the other week. And we also learned that Gorilla Monsoon has suspended Mr. Perfect over what went down. And Hennig basically sold it in a manner in which I can only best describe as beyond giving no fucks. Like, he knew his contract was up. He knew he was leaving to go to WCW. He could not even pretend to be angry over the suspension. It was comical. Like, you've seen guys phone it in when you know they're not about to re-sign somewhere. That was Mr. Perfect during this clip they aired from Superstars. Could not care less. But enough of that. Let's talk about the big segment on this week's Raw. What was more like a precursor to set up an even bigger segment next week on Raw. We had Stone Cold in studio for a live interview. And they had a lot of ground to cover here. They first drew attention to the Austin Pillman angle from Superstars, which we already kind of talked about earlier. This is where Austin explained why he laid out Pillman and crippled his leg with the chair. It was not only because Pillman was hogging Stone Cold's interview time, but when Pillman tried to address Bret as the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, that was where Austin lost his cool and started teeing off on him. And he did at one point also start beating up Bryan with a walking cane. Very matter of fact, Austin told Vince and Jerry, if I had more time, who knows what else I would have done with that cane. Excuse me? Where was he going with that? Were we to believe Austin was threatening to sodomize Pillman? It didn't help that he also made a comment shortly thereafter about jerking people around. Just like Austin's been jerked around in the WWF since day one. The fuck was going on in those locker rooms? Now, I'm also glossing over the bigger thing they advertised here. Next week on Raw, the WWF camera team is going to travel to Brian Pillman's home for a special interview. And this did not sit well with Austin from the beginning. He's not happy with guys like Pillman and Hart getting preferential treatment. They get to sit from the comfort of their own living room to get interviewed. Meanwhile, Austin has to travel from city to city to do his interviews. He is getting fucked around. So this is where Austin lets everybody know that he's going to pay a special visit to Pillman's home next week, along with the WWF camera crew. Now, I'm obviously going to have several questions to rattle off before we even get to next week. But you know what? I'm going to wait and hold off until we review the Pillman-Austin confrontation, because it's a very iconic angle. And since it's been a while, me having seen the whole thing in its entirety, I want to wait and see how much of that I remember offhand. Not just the stuff with the gun. Here was the crazy thing, though. There were two major things to take away from this segment. The Austin Pillman stuff, which was very plain as day. But then there was also the very subtle hint they planted for what would soon to become the feud/moneymaker that kickstarted the turnaround for the WWF in the next 2 to 3 years. And I'm talking about the Austin McMahon feud. They absolutely foreshadowed that during this segment. When Austin and Vince are going back and forth, and Vince is going, "Why hasn't Gorilla Monsoon taken action against you yet?" To which Austin responds by saying, "Well, hell, Vince, you're the owner. You're the guy that runs the ship. Why don't you take action and do something about it?" I'll tell you why. It's because you're a greedy bastard that sees nothing but money in the idea of Pillman versus Austin on pay-per-view. You couldn't care less about the well-being of Pillman's future. The only thing you see is a money-making opportunity. And if you suspend or fire me, oh, there goes 50% of your gate. I'm untouchable whether you like it or not. So stick that up your ass sideways. And it's like, holy cow. They're actually setting the field for Austin McMahon in 1996. That is... You know, it's funny because it goes beyond that. They're not just setting the field for Austin versus McMahon in like 2 years, but they are teasing a feud now. Then 2 years' time, the babyface heel dynamic is going to get completely flipped, where Austin winds up becoming the face and Vince becomes the fucking heel. My God. Now you see, this is where the retrospective reviews get fun. Because you go back and see all these subtleties that you never would have picked up on having watched the footage for the first time. But then things get even crazier when you look deeper and realize that certain roles and dynamics change within the scope of the stories and feuds over time. I mean, it's the same thing we talked about last week with the Bret promo, where he's out there basically fostering the Montreal Screwjob a year before it ever happened. I'm telling you, man. This is why it's worth sifting through all the crap in between. Just to get special moments like this, where you can look back and say, it's where it all started. Now, of course, there was more to come with the Austin Bret stuff. They tried to pitch to Bret right after the break in a split screen, but they couldn't get their audio to function properly. Because, you know, it is the WWF we're talking about here. A multi-million-dollar federation. And these numbnuts couldn't figure out how to get audio equipment sorted out. So to stall for time, they went back to the ring for Billy Gunn versus Freddie Joe Freeloader. Within the first 30 seconds, they had Bart try to come out to challenge Billy to a fight. But then a bunch of officials came out to separate them, and Bart just left to go to the back. So Billy wound up going over with a top rope leg drop. I liked how Sunny was on commentary, literally so she could just admit the quiet part out loud. That she's using Billy to her advantage to try to liquidate his assets. She even put it perfectly. I'm not a gold-digging 304. I'm just a young, ambitious female looking out for my own financial needs. Now see, if only women could be that descriptive in the modern world. If they could just be blunt and open about their expectations, it would make the dating market so much easier to navigate. So from there, we went back to Austin and Bret, now that they got their audio issues fixed. And I'm glad they sorted everything out, because, well, not that the competition this week was all that blaring anyway, but this little 3 or 4 segment made the entire show worth watching, despite that everything else virtually kicked rocks. And here's what I loved about the interplay between Bret and Austin here. You compare this to all the bullshit you get in today's product, where you've got two guys or two girls cutting promos back and forth. And the whole thing just sounds like over-scripted, overwritten soap opera gobbledygook. And you don't ever believe a goddamn word anybody says. The exchange between Austin and Bret here, it was great. Because it just sounded like two hot-headed guys having a raw fight. They didn't always wait for somebody to finish a thought. They didn't just stand around with moop face while the other person said their piece. They treated it like an actual argument. Like two guys that had a bitter feud going on, and they were really fucking mad at one another. I mean, Austin's facials were outstanding. Anytime Bret was talking, you would just see Austin making these smug expressions at the camera, being a raging douchebag the whole time, just waiting for his chance to shoot back and throw an insult at Bret. And here's basically everything they talked about. Bret told everyone that Austin wasn't the reason he took the last 5 months off. He still stands by saying Austin is the best wrestler in the WWF. And he's back to prove that on November 17th. Bret still has a lot left in the tank. And he'll show everybody why he's still the bedrock of the WWF. Then Austin retorted back by saying that Bret left because he was scared of him. And as far as the pay-per-view goes, the issues between him and Bret won't be over after the pay-per-view. Those issues will persist until one of them is dead. And that's the bottom line. And again, man, just to give yourself some kind of evaluation window, go watch this particular promo exchange, and then go watch a promo exchange from any Raw or SmackDown in the last 10 years. You're never going to find anything comparable to this, especially in terms of believability. You're just going to get a bunch of scripted lingo, or guys are reciting lines that aren't theirs. They're being told to act and respond in certain ways. And it just comes off phony. This wasn't phony. It was work, yes. But again, you could still believe that these two hated each other. You could still buy into the dialogue. This is what wrestling used to be. Hell, even during the hokiest of times like the WWF in the early to mid-90s. You would still get stuff like this on occasion. And it would always make the shows worth watching just for 5 or 6 minutes of decent back and forth promo work. When the guys were actually allowed to use their own material. Imagine that. So then we had the TV main event of Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog. If their summer feud was a testimony to anything, it's amazing how much better an HBK Bulldog feud would have worked had they done away with any involvement from Diana Smith. Yeah, she quickly dissipated into the ether, didn't she? Just put Shawn and Davey in the ring to have a match with no bells and whistles. Hey, go figure. The work was usually pretty good. Although the crowd response to Shawn here was very telling. Especially comparing now to the summer when he was at least still somewhat over with the men. Not anymore, dude. It is a John Cena scenario at this point. You got two different fan demographics reacting to Shawn. All the women cheer him, and all the men shower him with boos. And it's not even close. And you don't even have to simply listen to the crowd to hear that. Just watch the way the people react in the seats. Anytime Shawn would do something offensively here, the women would all get up and applaud him. And as soon as Davey cut him off for the heat, Every single solitary dude in that audience leapt to their feet with joy. They were so happy to see the babyface get dropped. It is wild. When you go back and actually dissect the Shawn hatred here in the fall of '96, it's crazy. The guys in particular are so beyond fed up with this overplayed, forced babyface run. And I know Shawn Michaels fans hate hearing this, but it deserves repeating. He was vastly unpopular at this point, people. Objectively speaking, everyone was sick of the boyhood dream BS. So they're out there having this split crowd match. Vince is spending the entire time on commentary talking about police showing up to arrest Austin for attacking one of the production guys backstage. Yeah, I forgot to mention that during that little Austin Bret promo. Austin got pissed that they tried to cut his feed, so he attacked a production guy and dumped the scaffolding on him. I can see why that might be grounds for getting the police involved. So anyway, Shawn starts making his comeback, and right as he's setting up Davey for the sweet chin, Owen gets up from the commentary position to go pick Shawn's ankle for the DQ. At which point, Sid runs out and throws Owen into the ring so they could do another one of their heated altercation dealio bobs between Sid and Shawn. This one was great, though, because it was so poorly thought out. Shawn and Sid have their backs turned to one another as they're throwing punches at the heels. And in order to set up what they had planned here, Sid accidentally elbowing Shawn in the back, he practically had to look over his shoulder to make sure Shawn was in position to take the elbow in the first place. So the whole thing just came off incredibly phony. And of course they argue, which doesn't fare well for Shawn, because everyone starts chanting Sid. And then for no discernible reason that I can think of beyond the fact that Owen is a fucking dipshit, he then willfully tells Sid and Shawn that they will put the World Tag Team titles on the line to get a match with them. Because Owen clearly thought that one out. I don't entirely understand this logic. A heel champion deciding on behalf of his team that they will voluntarily defend the tag belts when they don't have to and have no incentive to do so, considering the two babyfaces are currently set to wrestle one another at the pay-per-view in less than a month. But they're going to defend the belts anyway, because they're honorable bad guys. Or maybe Owen was feeling charitable. Who knows? I'll wrap it up on this note. The one thing that's become patently clear about Monday Night Raw, this whole program has become the Steve Austin show. He is single-handedly carrying the entire program on his back. I cannot stress enough how horrible the majority of everything else is, outside Austin Bret. I mean, Taker Mankind has been great too, but the Austin Bret thing was on a whole different plane. While everybody else was doing sports entertainment to the nth degree, you had Bret versus Austin, which was the only true, genuine, realistic feud that would have fit in with any top promotion during the territory days. Kind of used to be the same thing I would complain about when I used to review AEW, and when Punk was still around. There was the CM Punk material, then there was all the slop shop nonsense surrounding it. guaranteed one great segment on a program and then approximately 17 other garbage segments engulfing it. Did it make the shows worth watching? You can be the judge. I guess some things never change, do they? Well, anyway, it's probably a good time to close the show here. So, got a big show coming up on Friday because we have the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view we're going to be recapping. And we have Mid-South and World Class as well. So, I'm going to get going on the the editing process for this Retro Raw recap, and we'll see how things go throughout the week. But on that note, we'll wrap it up there. Take care, everyone, and talk to you soon. Peace out.